The morning sun blazed over the chrome skyline of downtown Los Angeles as a black man in his late 50s slowly pulled up to the luxury hotel's valet stand. His car, a rusted, dented 1992 Toyota Corolla, groaned like it had survived a war. As he stepped out in a faded denim jacket and worn-out boots, a silver Bentley screeched to a halt beside him. Out stepped a man in his 40s, white, sharply dressed in a navy suit, gold watch flashing in the light. He laughed, loud enough for the line of guests and valets to hear. "You lost, Grandpa? The scrapyard's that way," he said, jerking his thumb behind him. Some guests chuckled. The black man didn't respond. He handed his keys to the valet silently. "Careful not to catch tetanus from that heap," the rich man smirked. Still, the man said nothing. His eyes, calm and unreadable, lingered on the Bentley's emblem for a moment before walking away. Something in his silence made the laughter die faster than expected. Inside the hotel lobby, gleaming with marble floors and golden chandeliers, the black man passed unnoticed through a sea of luxury. His denim jacket seemed out of place among designer gowns and tailored tuxedos. Yet he walked with quiet authority, unaffected by stares. At the coffee bar, the rich man stood with a group of colleagues, pointing toward the valet screen replaying the entrance. "Seriously, look at that rust bucket. I don't even know how that thing moves." They all laughed again. One younger associate shifted uncomfortably, eyeing the old man from across the room. Something about him felt off. Not poor, just hidden. The older man sat alone at a corner table, sipping plain black coffee. His fingers tapped slowly against the ceramic mug, not in annoyance but calculation. He looked up, right into the younger associate's eyes. Just for a second. And it was enough to send a chill down his spine. The valet station buzzed with activity as staff shuffled keys and juggled guest arrivals. One valet, a young Latino man named Mateo, stared at the keyring in his hand. The Toyota's key stood out, metal worn smooth from use, attached to a leather tag embossed with 3 unfamiliar initials. Curious, he opened the driver's door. The interior was meticulously clean, dashboard upgraded with state-of-the-art tech, custom heads-up display, biometric ignition, military-grade navigation module. "What the hell is this?" Mateo muttered. He looked around, then gently started the engine. The car came to life, not with a roar, but a perfectly tuned electric purr. His eyes widened. Another valet stepped over, eyes on the screen. "That's not a Corolla engine," he whispered. Mateo nodded, stunned. "It's not even close." Back in the lobby, the rich man adjusted his cufflinks and strutted toward the elevator with his entourage. As the doors opened, he nearly bumped into the black man stepping out. "Whoa, still here?" he sneered. "Thought you were off delivering newspapers or something." The man looked him square in the eyes for the first time. "Sometimes the best rides wear the oldest skin," he said softly, then walked away. Confused, the rich man hesitated, the doors closing slowly behind him. Inside the elevator, silence fell. His associate leaned in. "That guy, he's not just some random old dude, is he?" The rich man scoffed, but the thought had landed. Unease crept in like smoke through a crack in the door. In the underground parking garage, Mateo paced beside the Corolla, glancing back at the glowing dashboard. "There's no way this tech belongs in a car like this," he whispered. He opened the trunk, expecting junk, and found a compact server rack satellite transmitter and a sealed silver case labeled Prototype V6 Quantum Drive. He took a step back, heart racing. Suddenly, the elevator chimed and the black man appeared. Calmly, he walked over and reached for the keys. Mateo stammered, "Sir, this car, who are you?" The man paused, looked at the glowing components in the trunk, then back at Mateo. "I build what others are afraid to imagine," he said, then closed the trunk gently. Mateo stood frozen as the car pulled away, silently, smoothly, into the blinding light of the garage exit. 30 years earlier, in a humid Louisiana garage, the same man, much younger, mid-20s, was hunched over an engine block under a flickering light. Sweat dripped down his brow as he welded scraps together with trembling hands. The voice of his father echoed from an old voicemail playing on a cassette player. "Son, don't let him tell you you can't build what they want sell you. You hear me?" That night, he was trying to recreate an electric engine he'd seen in a stolen engineering magazine. No degree, no backing, just grit. His tools were salvaged, his knowledge self-taught, and his heart carried a quiet fury. Every time he failed, he tried again. The world outside his window offered sirens, smoke, and hunger. But inside, his hands built hope from broken parts. He called it Project Lazarus. No one knew it existed. Yet, his first invention didn't work. Neither did the second. By the 10th, the fuse box exploded and blackened half the wall. But he kept going. He worked nights at a junkyard, quietly collecting rejected electronics, discarded batteries, and car parts. Every paycheck went to tools. No friends. No parties. Just purpose. His only companion, a stray dog that slept beneath the bench, tail wagging through every spark. He wasn't trying to prove anything to anyone, only to himself. Each failure made him smarter, sharper, angrier. The anger wasn't loud. It was focused. One evening, he finally connected a stripped-down V4 engine to his prototype. He flicked the ignition, and for the first time, the motor spun. Not loud. Just clean. Quiet. Why? Efficient. His hands trembled. He fell to his knees and wept. When he tried to patent the design, he was laughed out of the room. One executive even said, "You build that in your cousin's shed or something?" But someone else noticed. A retired engineer, an old white man with lung cancer and nothing to lose, offered mentorship in secret. Together, they refined the engine, scaled down its emissions, and wrote a new submission, under the mentor's name. When it was accepted, the young man didn't care. "Let them think it's yours," he said. "I just want it to work." The mentor smiled. "You've got a fire, son. That's rare." In a small moment of generosity, the engineer opened doors. Labs, investors' meetings. Most ended with a polite decline. Some ended in silence. But the young man never stopped showing up. Years passed. The mentor died. One day, investors dried up. But the man's fire never did. He started his own workshop, this time, legally. No more shadows. He rebranded the prototype and began quietly building cars for tech enthusiasts. Vehicles with unmatched energy retention, silent motors, and fail-proof self-diagnostics. Still, no one knew his name. Every success was whispered, each review anonymous. That was his choice. He didn't want fame. He wanted legacy. "Let the work speak," he'd mutter. On a shelf in his new office sat the original cassette player. The tape had long worn out, but he never threw it away. It was his compass. A memory of who he built for, and why. By the time he turned 50, his vehicles were powering silent emergency fleets, private security units, and experimental racing circuits. He still wore denim jackets, and still drove the old Corolla, now retrofitted with a quantum-class motor. That car wasn't a symbol of poverty. It was a reminder. A monument. He had offices in 4 countries, hundreds of employees, and patents stacked higher than anyone could count. But he remained invisible by design. "If they don't see you coming, they can't block your road," he once told a young engineer. And now, as he stood silently in that luxury hotel surrounded by billionaires who thought he was nobody, he knew one truth better than any engine blueprint. Real power never announces itself. It simply arrives. His company, Obsidian Motors, had grown quietly, yet aggressively. It operated out of a discreet industrial campus, producing some of the most advanced EV systems on the planet. Yet no press releases, no flashy launches. Competitors were growing suspicious. One of them was Evox Automotive, a publicly adored luxury brand, owned by the same rich man who mocked the old Corolla. Weeks after the valet incident, Evox executives sat around a boardroom table, agitated. "This Obsidian outfit is bleeding us. How the hell is no one talking about them?" barked the CEO. "We don't even know who runs it," another added. A younger analyst clicked a button. A schematic of a stealth vehicle, military grade, appeared. "They're already in defense contracts, and we just got notice. They're moving into consumer retail next quarter." The room went still. "Find out who's behind it." "I want him at the next partner summit," the CEO said, jaw clenched. Meanwhile, the man sat in his lab, surrounded by engineers half his age, guiding them with quiet confidence. "Don't chase attention, chase innovation," he told them, examining a prototype battery pack. One young intern hesitated. "Sir, Evox is asking to meet with our founder at the global summit." The man didn't look up. "Ignore it." But another engineer added, "Sir, they're trying to copy the Q drive module. If we don't go public, they'll bury the truth." That got his attention. Slowly, he stood. "Book the summit." "I'll attend," he said. It would be his first public appearance in nearly a decade. That night, alone in his home garage, he stood beside the old Corolla, still flawless in performance, still disguised in age. He gently placed a hand on its hood. "Time to show them where silence leads," he murmured. The Global Autotech Summit drew the richest names in engineering, energy, and automotive. CEOs, media, investors, all hungry for the next big reveal. Evox's booth stood like a cathedral. Chrome pillars, polished vehicles, champagne flutes. Their CEO stood at the center, all smiles. Then word spread. Obsidian's founder had arrived. No PR team. No entourage. Just a man in a denim jacket and boots, walking calmly past astonished crowds. Whispers turned into stares. Some laughed, thinking it was a joke. Others followed in silence. When he stepped onto the presentation floor, even Evox executives froze. The man placed a small nondescript device on the podium. "You built luxury," he said, voice steady. "We built resurrection." Then the lights dimmed, and the screen behind him flickered to life with engine simulations that outclassed everything in the room. The presentation was short, unapologetic, raw. Numbers, performance metrics, test results, all undeniable. He spoke of clean energy, autonomy, restoration. "Obsidian isn't a brand," he said. "It's a blueprint for what happens when you're told you don't belong, and build anyway." As he walked off stage, a stunned silence followed. The Evox CEO stepped forward. "Wait," he said. "You, that old man at the hotel?" The man turned, smiled slightly. "Funny thing about judgment, it's loud when it thinks it's right." The room rippled with murmurs. The younger analyst who had suspected the truth earlier stared, wide-eyed. "That's him," he whispered. "He's the one they couldn't stop." The summit's cameras had already begun to record, and the truth was going viral. Within hours, social media exploded. The man behind Obsidian trended globally. Photos of the old Corolla at the hotel went viral. One post read, "He didn't just walk in with an old car, he drove in with a future they refused to see." News anchors scrambled to trace his story, investors panicked, and Evox stock dipped by 8% in a single day. Inside Obsidian's offices, his team watched the chaos unfold. "Should we release your bio now?" someone asked. The man shook his head. "No, let them keep guessing. It's more fun that way." But one thing had changed forever. He wasn't invisible anymore. And now they'd have to face what they once dismissed. A man with a machine that didn't just change cars. It changed the rules of the game. As the news spread, interviews surfaced. Mechanics, engineers, former classmates, even ex-rivals. All painted a picture of a man who had never played by the rules. He built his own table when he wasn't offered a seat. In one clip, a retired professor recalled, "He used to sneak into night classes at the state university, sat in the back, Never said a word, just listened. We only realized he wasn't enrolled 2 years later. But he knew more than my top students. The press dubbed him the silent architect. But the real revelation came when a leaked internal memo from a major defense contractor confirmed it. Obsidian wasn't just innovating engines. It had developed a working prototype of the world's first self-healing autonomous vehicle shell. Military grade. What? Lightweight, data white, bulletproof. And the mastermind. The man in the denim jacket, once called crazy for even sketching the idea on a napkin. Back at Evox headquarters, panic brewed behind polished doors. Their R&D team confirmed what they'd feared. Obsidian's patent applications had been months ahead of theirs. Even worse, the Q drive, the core of Obsidian's tech, was designed in a way that made any imitation legally and structurally impossible. He beat us, quietly, completely, one executive muttered. The CEO stood silently, staring at a projection of the Corolla. We laughed, he whispered, at the very thing that outran us. Suddenly, the rich man wasn't thinking about engines. He was thinking about that moment outside the hotel, the smirk, the mockery. That car wasn't falling apart. It was hiding. And the man wasn't broken. He was watching, waiting. Wow. And now, they were behind him. The man was invited to speak at a tech ethics conference weeks later. He didn't prepare slides. No marketing team. No stage theatrics. He stood in front of a crowd of suits and scholars, hands bare, voice low. I was never chasing cars, he said. I was chasing what they wouldn't give us, control. He told them about growing up with systems designed to keep people like him out. You called it underqualified. I called it underinvested. The room was silent. Innovation isn't born from approval. It's born when someone says no. And we decide that's not the end of the sentence. Applause didn't erupt. It rose, slow, reverent, unanimous. Even those who came skeptical stood. And for the first time, the man's eyes welled, not with grief, but with long overdue recognition. After the talk, a small boy approached him outside the venue. No reporters, no cameras. Just a kid in a hoodie, holding a torn notebook. You really made all that? The boy asked. The man knelt down, smiled gently. Every bolt. The boy opened his notebook to a messy sketch of a car with wings. They said it's dumb, he whispered. The man glanced down, then back up. Looks like the future to me. He tore a page from his own journal, scribbled a formula. Start here. Then keep going, even when they laugh. The boy nodded. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't viral. But in that moment, another legacy began. Because that boy would never forget being seen, not by a celebrity, not by a tech god, but by someone who had built everything from nothing. Back home, he sat once again in that old garage, though now filled with advanced machinery and glowing server racks. But in the center, still untouched, sat the Corolla. He lowered himself into the driver's seat, looked at the cracked dashboard, and smiled. You did good, old friend, he whispered. Then he opened the glove box and removed a folded piece of paper. It was the first sketch of the Q drive, drawn with a broken pencil on napkin paper decades ago. He framed it, not for display, but for memory. Above it, he wrote one line. They will never see you coming if they refuse to look. And with that, he leaned back in the seat of the car that had carried him from nowhere to everywhere, in silence, in power, and in purpose. Weeks after the summit, Evox's future was hanging by a thread. With lawsuits pending, partnerships collapsing and market trust fading, desperation forced the CEO to request a private meeting with him. They met at an executive negotiation suite overlooking the Pacific, two men once separated by power, now separated by principle. We'd like to offer a merger, the CEO began, voice tighter than his tailored collar. The man didn't respond right away. He stood, walked to the window, and watched the waves. You want to ride a ship you tried to sink, he said quietly. I was wrong, the CEO admitted. I didn't know who you were. The man turned. You still don't, but I'll make it easy. Obsidian doesn't merge with companies built on mockery. It outlasts them. He walked out before the CEO could respond, leaving silence more brutal than any rejection. That same day, Obsidian Motors launched their public campaign, not with ads, but with action. They donated 10 custom vehicles to underserved communities across the country. No logos. No branding. Just silent, perfect machines engineered to empower the unseen. Mobility is dignity. Read a small tagline on the site. The message resonated far louder than any marketing stunt. In one neighborhood, a single mother wept as she received a car that would help her work 2 jobs without walking 3 miles each way. In another, a teacher smiled as her students circled a vehicle made in their own zip code. The man watched all of it from a distance, unannounced, unphotographed, unknown. That was the point. The world had learned his name. But now, they needed to remember the cause. Media outlets begged for interviews. He declined them all. Instead, he chose to appear at a high school robotics competition, quietly sponsoring the event under a false name. When the winning team was announced, a group of teenagers from Detroit lifted their trophy in disbelief. Then they were handed a sealed envelope. Inside was a full-ride scholarship offered to Obsidian's elite apprenticeship program. Handwritten on the card, "The world doesn't need more rich men. It needs more builders." The crowd didn't even realize he was sitting quietly in the back row, wearing a hoodie, clapping slowly. He didn't care about the camera. He cared about the spark he saw in those kids' eyes. The same spark he once had, alone in a humid garage with nothing but broken tools, and a dream nobody else could see. Meanwhile, Evox's empire crumbled under the weight of its arrogance. Shareholders demanded change. The CEO stepped down in disgrace. But the man, he didn't celebrate. He didn't post about it. No press release, no press tour. His revenge wasn't destruction. It was progress. He gathered his senior engineers for a private meeting and opened a clean slate. "No more hiding," he said. "Next year we build the impossible. Again." What followed was a flurry of ideas. Solar regenerative chassis, emotion-responsive AI, off-grid battery, ecosystems. It wasn't about being better than Evox. It was about proving once again that boundaries exist only where belief ends. His legacy wouldn't be about beating the system. It would be about reinventing what the system could never imagine. Late that night, he returned to the same hilltop where he used to sketch engine designs under moonlight. He parked the Corolla, now silent as breath, and looked out over the sleeping city. His story wasn't carved in granite or shouted from screens. It moved like his engine, quiet, efficient, unstoppable. He pulled out an old photo, his father, arms greasy, holding a wrench with pride. On the back scribbled words, "They don't have to see you. Just don't let them stop you." He tucked it into the dashboard. This wasn't his victory lap. It was just the next ignition. He smiled, shifted the gear gently, and let the old car roll forward. Into the dark. Into the future. Into a world he helped rebuild. One engine, one idea, one silent revolution at a time. The world shifted, but he stayed grounded. In a small press conference weeks later, the man appeared unexpectedly. Not in a suit, not on stage, but standing among the people. He announced a new initiative, a national program to teach underrepresented youth about sustainable automotive design, funded entirely by Obsidian. "Genius isn't rare," he said. "Access is." The room was quiet. No flashy visuals. Just conviction. Reporters asked about competitors, market domination, revenge. He smiled, but didn't answer. "This was never about beating them," he finally said. "It was about building what they refused to see." His voice, steady and low, carried more weight than any viral soundbite. Because for the first time, the world wasn't just listening, they were learning. Back at Obsidian HQ, engineers worked around the clock. But something was different now. The silence was filled with hope, not secrecy. The man walked the floor daily, sleeves rolled up, offering guidance without ego. To them, he wasn't just a founder. He was proof that failure, grit, and vision could rewrite any story. One afternoon, a junior technician asked, "Why'd you keep driving the old Corolla all this time?" The man looked up from his blueprint and smiled. "Because it reminds me what they see and what they don't." The room chuckled softly. But behind that smile was a truth every person in the building understood. Legacy doesn't need a spotlight. It needs roots. The rich man, the former CEO of Evox, had vanished from headlines. But one rainy morning, he stood outside a modest tech school, holding an umbrella, waiting in silence. Inside, the man finished speaking to a small class about resilience. As he exited, the two locked eyes for the first time since the failed deal. "I came to apologize," the rich man said. "Not to you, because I think you're doing just fine, but to the kids I taught the wrong things." The man studied him for a moment, then nodded once. "If you really mean that, invest here, not in me." He pointed toward the classroom window. The rich man looked down, humbled. "I will." No cameras. No handshake. Just a hard truth and a chance to rebuild. That, too, was power. He returned to the neighborhood where it all began, where sparks once flew in a dark garage and hope was stitched together from scrap. But now, a new building stood on that lot, Obsidian Innovation Hub. Free classes, community workshops, mentorship, labs. As he walked through its halls, kids in lab coats waved, others peered into glass walls lined with 3D printers. A mural stretched across one wall, his silhouette beside the original Corolla, painted by local artists. He paused before it, studying the face that once went unseen. For the first time, he didn't look away. The past had shaped him, yes. But this was where he chose to stay. Not as a founder. Not as a boss. But as a builder. That night, he sat on the rooftop of the Innovation Hub, watching the skyline blink and shimmer. No applause. No ceremony. Just the quiet hum of something alive. Something growing. A young girl from the robotics class sat beside him, notebook in hand. "What's the next thing you'll build?" she asked. He chuckled. "Hopefully nothing," he replied. "It's your turn now." She hesitated. "But what if I mess it up?" He handed her his old napkin sketch, the first Q-Drive draft, edges torn but preserved. "Then you try again, like I did. Until it works." Her eyes widened. "This is yours. Now it's yours," he said. She didn't speak. She just held it like it was fire. As the wind picked up, he leaned back, smiled, and finally rested. Years passed. Obsidian didn't just survive, it flourished. But the man slowly stepped back from the spotlight. He no longer needed to lead every meeting or approve every blueprint. He had passed the torch, and it burned brighter in younger hands. Still, the Corolla remained. Maintained. Revered. Not as a symbol of defiance anymore, but of origin. And one bright Saturday morning, as crowds gathered outside a design academy for a community auto expo, a hush fell over the lot. The old Corolla, still gleaming with hidden brilliance, rolled in through the gates. Kids ran up in awe, not of its looks, but of what it meant. Behind the wheel sat a teenage girl, focused, proud. In the passenger seat, her mentor, the man. Older now, slower perhaps, but smiling in the same quiet way. The torch hadn't been dropped. It had been driven forward. Inside the expo, the girl presented the car on her own. She explained its electric core, its regenerative shell, and its modular AI enhancements, all installed by her team, all derived from what he taught her. "We didn't rebuild it to look modern," she said. "We rebuilt it to remind people where innovation starts." The crowd listened, really listened. Parents, engineers, and politicians alike stood still as she walked them through the vehicle's silent acceleration and sustainable architecture. The man watched from afar, seated in a folding chair near the back, hands clasped, eyes proud. He said nothing. He didn't need to. His voice lived on in hers. And in that moment, for the first time in his entire journey, he no longer felt the weight of proving anything. He had passed into purpose. Later, as the event quieted and the sun dipped low, she returned to him. "I think I'm ready," she said. He looked at her, really looked, and nodded. "Then take it," he said, offering her the keys. "Not just the car, the mission." She hesitated, then took them, hands trembling slightly. "What if I forget why we started?" He chuckled softly. "Drive it long enough, and it'll remind you." The moment was simple. No fanfare. No applause. Just a quiet passing between generations. As the girl walked toward the car, her silhouette framed by amber sunlight, the man closed his eyes briefly. A lifetime of engines, silence, and motion had led to this. And it was perfect. She drove off that evening, not fast, but intentional. Down neighborhood streets, through the heart of the city, the old car hummed with silent power. Passers-by turned their heads, not in judgment but in awe. And as she drove, the city seemed to shift, its rhythm aligning with the hum of quiet innovation. In a distant diner, a man glanced up at the TV as a segment played, "Meet the next generation of automotive leadership." It showed her driving. The man grinned. "They finally get it," he whispered to himself. And back on the road, the girl reached into the glove compartment. Inside was a note, handwritten, yellowed with time. "It's not what you drive, it's what drives you." Her eyes glistened. She didn't cry. She just drove on. On a quiet stretch of highway outside the city, she pulled over at a lookout. Stars blinked overhead. She stepped out, stood beside the car, and took it in, the road behind, the road ahead. In the silence, the voice of her mentor echoed within her, not as instruction but as rhythm. The past wasn't behind her, it was built into every part of what she drove. She took one deep breath, then whispered aloud, "Let's keep going." No music. No lights. Just stars, gravel, wind, and resolve. She got back into the car, turned the key, and pulled back onto the highway. And in that final image, the silhouette of a young girl driving an old machine toward a new horizon, the story ended. Or maybe, it simply began again.